Descent of Dragons, arguably one of the best expansions ever printed by a lot of players. It is incredibly powerful. This expansion is very memorable for a lot of players. It introduced so many, staple cards to the game that are played even till this day. A lot of cards in here are still powerful enough to be played, and a lot of them are fan favorites. Of course, we're starting with Druid, and I think, next expansion is when Demon Hunter is finally getting introduced, so that'll be cool. First card I want to talk about is Ysera Unleashed. Like I said in the other video, think this is a perfect idea for a ramp Druid card. I think a very simple change for this should be something like shuffle more portals into the deck, maybe 10 portals. I don't think that 10 would make this card that much better, I'm going to be honest with you. And then I think that first change, it has to go to 8 mana. 9 mana is a lot. 8 mana, of course, still a lot by today in Wild standards. But this is a twofold buff. It will help, a Dragon Druid out, a Reno Dragon Druid kind of deck that doesn't really run previous Reno cards anyway, aside from Zephyrus, will like this, being able to use it as a value engine. A lot of those decks are running Ray Straza anyway, and this card is probably still better than Ray Straza. And then I think shuffling 10 Dream Portals is just a pretty big bump in how many, dragons you're going to get. Wild has way more dragons, so you can get a lot more low rolls, so I think increasing the amount of Dream Portals helps a lot. So, a lot of the other cards that are in Druid, especially for this expansion, are already quite powerful, or, are just missing a deck where they can be played in, like, say, Embiggen or Treant cards are actually very good. So I was thinking, okay, Goru is, of course, a Treant synergy card. We can buff this card a lot. I think what you could do is make this 8 mana. Costs 1 less for each Treant you've summoned this game. And then Battle Cry, for the rest of the game, your Treants have +1/+1. Can I make this fit on 4 lines? I don't think so. Okay, well, you get the idea. Taunt costs 1 less for each Treant you summon this game. Battle Cry for the rest of the game, your Treants have +1/+1. You could probably word this to make it fit better. The reason that it's 8 mana is because of Cultivation. Cultivation is basically the same thing, but it's a spell, and then it's +2/+2 just to the board. It's about 8 Treant, so I think Goru fitting the 8 Treant kind of place to cost 0 mana fits pretty well. I still don't think this actually makes the card very good. I think also you'd probably nerf the stats, maybe like a 5/5, because it is going to be 0 mana. But I don't actually think this makes much of a difference for Treant Druid, the current deck, but it definitely doesn't not help. I think it would like this card, but I don't think it makes the deck suddenly great. The deck is fine. You can play it. You can win a lot of games on it, but it's not like a meta deck really at all. A lot of people still are sleeping on it. It is quite powerful. So I think Goru going to this kind of style, costing less for Drain Summon, being 1 more mana to fit Cultivation. It is similar to Cultivation, except it's always going to be statted instead of rather just the one board. But it's more just like technically it's just a third copy of Mark of the Lotus a lot of the time, and I think that's probably the best this card's ever going to get, let's be honest. Primordial Explorer in Hunter, this card is kind of just significantly worse than Amalgam of the Deep. It's, 3 mana to gain Poisonous, have the same stat line, effectively have the same effect. It's not very good. I think that easily this card could go to 2 mana, no question, but I think you just really say fuck it. And Dragon Hunter is pretty terrible in Wild. It's actually unplayable in Wild. So this would be a huge, immensely gigantic buff to Dragon Hunter and just Hunter in general, giving Hunter a really powerful 1-drop. I will sing till the fucking cows come home that Hunter has terrible 1-drops, and this would help so significantly. It's a decent body, it has Poisonous, so it can trade very efficiently, and it discovers a card, and it's a dragon, so you can't really abuse it in beast decks for a super powerful 1-drop. Fits absolutely perfectly, in my opinion, to the Hunter class, and I don't know. Dragon Hunter is struggling immensely, and it needs a card like this so badly. Speaking of Dragon Hunter struggling immensely, Corrosive Breath. So when you look at Mind, or what is it called? Mind Seer, sorry. Mind Seer is 1 mana, deal 2 damage to a minion. If it dies, deal 3 damage to the enemy hero. This is 2 mana, deal 3 damage to a minion. If you're holding a dragon, it also hits the enemy hero. Wow. I know. Holding a dragon is not exactly a hard condition, but hear me out for a second. Shadow Priest has Void Touch Attendant. Hunter does not. Yeah. You also have to be able to target a minion for this to do anything. It's incredibly powerful. Don't get me wrong. This card's really, really strong, and yeah. But I was thinking, okay, yeah, maybe you don't like that it's dealing 3 to a minion and the enemy hero. So I'm thinking, okay, what if it's, deal 2 damage to a minion if you're holding a dragon? Deal 3 damage to the enemy hero. It's not identical. It is a little bit worse on the front end of the deal 2 damage to a minion part, but like I'm saying, Dragon Hunter is pretty much unplayable fucking garbage and wild. It's a really beloved archetype that I like a lot, personally. A lot of other Hunter players absolutely adore Dragon Hunter. A lot of people in general adored Dragon Hunter when it was around, and I'm going to be honest with you, it needs huge push cards like this for buffs, or just significant amount of support being printed, and Blizzard's never going to print more dragon support because it was a parasitic archetype for Hunter, and that's really fucking unfortunate. Elemental Allies is one of the strongest draw cards in the entire game. It's just really hard to make work because it takes more than 1 turn to set up. So I was thinking, okay, well, making the card have an easier condition is probably the best way to go about it. Play an Elemental 2 turns in a row. Play an Elemental on 2 separate turns. On 2 separate turns. This is pretty simple. Instead of having to play an Elemental 2 turns in a row, which isn't too easy a lot of the time, yeah, you can do it, and it's not the worst thing in the world, but this makes it more of a kind of universal card for Mage. You don't have to run it only in Elemental Mage. You can actually have benefit to running Elementals in your regular Mage decks, and then you'll draw 3 spells from it. In a Elemental Mage, it's basically exactly the same. Sometimes, if you low roll, you don't really have a playable elemental, it will help you in those cases, so it's a tiny bit of a buff, but it's more of a buff to Mage overall, giving Mage, more reason to make use of elementals, because there's kind of just no reason to have more than 1, maybe 2 elementals in your deck at any given point in Mage. This card pushes the idea of elementals being the tried for Mage. You have a lot of elementals that you want to be running, and you have a super powerful synergy card to make you actually want to run elementals in Mage. Similar to how, Beasts and Hunter, even if you're not running a Beast Hunter specifically, you want to be running Beasts because not only are the Beasts powerful, but they have powerful synergy cards that actually make it worthwhile to run them. Malygos, Aspect of Magic. I think this card needs a twofold change. 1, you knock it down to 4 mana. The body doesn't really matter. It's the same body as Ma and Pa, except it doesn't have an on-board effect, so it actually doesn't make much of a difference. But I think instead of if you're holding a dragon, it should be if your deck has no duplicates. I think that holding a dragon is really holding back this card because there are just no fucking playable dragons in Mage. This would be a nice buff to a Reno Mage because the spells are still quite powerful on the wiki right now. You can still see these spells. They're actually still quite powerful. Deal 8 damage, draw 4 cards, 2 to all enemies for 2, or minions. Flame Strike's not that great, but it's fine. Now, Frost Nova's great, Polymorph's great, Missiles is pretty good, Frostbolt's pretty good. So, I think that just making it cheaper, of course, is necessary, and then giving it a significantly easier condition that doesn't make you actually have to run other dragons, which suck. They fucking suck so goddamn bad. Makes this card a lot better and a lot more splashable, and just I don't know. Maybe if you really are upset, you can play your Dragon Mage that does no support, hasn't had more cards printed since 2019, but you understand, you gotta understand that this is a much easier condition for a bad card. Bad cards need buffed in some way, so this is where I'm going with it. Pure Paladin was first introduced in Descent of Dragons, of course, and it's a pretty cool archetype. Lightforged Zealot was actually a very powerful card, being a 4-mana 4-2, get a 4-2 weapon. It's very similar to the Genji card I made, where it was 5-mana 5-3, get a 5-3 weapon. So I was thinking, okay, could we not just make this 3 mana? It already has a huge downside of no neutral cards, which is a significant downside. It is. And this card is already not played in any kind of Pure Paladin deck anyway, because, they're more about tribe-oriented things with, Pure Raider and, getting your Light Rays out and things like that. So I think that just knocking it down to 3 mana makes it a little bit better. You still get a lot of stats and a good weapon for the cost. And yeah, like I'm saying, it is a big downside to not have neutral cards, so I think that this is still worth it to, as a downside. This one's really simple. 1 mana. I don't really understand why Sanctuary is 2 mana. Every single other side quest is 1 mana. And, I get that it's, a lot of stats, but, you could just, now it's, Galloping Savior. Galloping Savior, of course, it's after they play 3 cards in 1 turn, get a 3-4, and now this is take no damage for a turn, get a 3-4. Take no damage per turn is the condition of Rigged Fair Game, and Rigged Fair Game draws you 3 cards. However, it is 3 mana versus 1, so you can get that. I think that this is a pretty simple change, just make it a 3-4, it makes it more in line with Galloping Savior, and then it's 1 mana like every other side quest. And, yeah, it's pretty good if you're going first, and your opponent can't really deal damage to your face, but, who fucking cares, man? It's a cool card. I like side quests. I like Sanctuary. It is an objectively cool card. Taking no damage for a turn isn't that easy as well. A lot of classes can deal damage to you in some way. A lot of classes have, their 1-drop that deals damage, or it's versus a class that wasn't going to be able to deal damage to you on turn 2 anyway, so it doesn't really make much of a difference. Chrono Breaker. So, this card never really made much sense to me. It's a pretty standard thing that death rattles are harder to pull off than battle cries, so they're usually either stronger or cheaper than their battle cry version. And of course, Chrono Breaker, I'm talking about Duskbreaker, which is a 4-mana 3-3 battle cry. If you're holding a dragon, deal 3 damage to all minions, or all other minions, I guess. So I don't really understand why Chrono Breaker is 5 mana and an understated minion and doesn't have a better death rattle. Just not really understanding this, personally. So I think, you just... the 4 mana 5-3. So it has a lot more attack, but it has, the same amount of health to make the death rattle pop off. I was considering making this 3 mana, and I'm like, would a 3 mana minion that deals 3 to all enemy minions be fair for the game? And I'm like, no, it really wouldn't. Sorry, another way you could do it is to increase the damage itself. So, and I also make it 3-3, which is Duskbreaker to 4 mana. If you're holding a dragon, deal 4 damage to all enemy minions. I think this is significantly better than where it is now, obviously. It's cheaper, it has a better effect, and since it's a death rattle, it's slower, it's not instant. You could, that's the idea behind it. I'm really not sure why they made it more expensive and understated and have the exact same effect, except I guess it doesn't hit your own stuff, but that's not that big of a difference. I don't know. I don't get it. I think that this is where the card should be. This card would probably not be the worst thing ever, especially, so yeah. Okay, so Breath of the Infinite is supposed to be, a dragon synergy card to, obviously go with your dragon style control priest rather than just a regular control priest. That's not how it really worked out. This card was just ran in regular control priest for a while. So I'm thinking, what if you made it kind of like Aftershocks, where it's, overcosted, but then when you meet the condition, it's undercosted. So I'm thinking, okay, why can't it be 4 mana if you're holding a dragon, only damage enemies, and cost 2 less? So it will cost 2 mana if you're holding dragons, so you can't really run this in like a standard style control priest. You wouldn't really do it anyway because Shadow Priest is better than running non-shadow spells. Shadow spells are better than holy spells and non-tribe or tag spells, and having the Void Form hero power is just better. So this is, for Dragon Priest specifically. It will be 2 mana almost always, and yeah, it's technically a nerf, but costs 2 less, makes it a lot better. 2 mana, deal 2 to all enemy minions is pretty good. Let's be real here. Flick Skyshiv is a pretty cool card. It's actually like one of my favorite Rogue legendaries ever printed. It's removal that Rogue doesn't really have access to, with just a pretty unique effect of destroying all copies. So it's really good against like certain specific decks. It's a really powerful tech card against like a Jade Druid or an Automaton Priest or things like that. So I think to make it better is you just lower the cost and increase the stats. 5 mana, 5/5. You have the Lotheb body, the very iconic Lotheb stat line, where you can have a pretty strong effect for pretty good body and cost. 5 mana, 5/5 is not anything to scoff at. It's not overstated by any means, but it's still pretty good. And then, like I'm saying, it makes Flick a little more splashable and actually just better. Being able to push damage after you've cleared like 1, maybe 2, maybe even 4 minions, depending on what the board looks like. It's really good against giants because, yeah, it's going to kill 2 giants for 1 card. It's very powerful. I think that this is a lot more thematically in line, I'd say, as well, because Flick is all about, destroying a specific minion and being a good kind of tech card that you can bounce and things like that, but it's mainly just a good tech card, and that's the thing. Lotheb, Boom Pistol Bully, they're 5 mana, 5/5 tech cards that are specifically good against one kind of thing. Battlecry minions, spells, a specific multi-use minion that you're going to have a lot of. That's where Flick comes in, and it fits into that kind of idea of these 5 mana, 5/5 tech cards. Stowaway, 5 mana, 4/4. If there are cards in your deck that didn't start there, draw 2 of them. I'm itching to do something. I'm itching for it. Draw them. Ooh. So this is probably disgusting. I'm not gonna lie. However, I don't give a fuck. It makes it so if you play like a Nerubian Unraveler, is that what it's called? The 4 mana, 4/4. I forget what it's actually called. I haven't played that card in forever. I probably haven't played that card in 7 years. I'm gonna be honest with you. Maybe 6 years, but still. The 4 mana, 4/4 shuffle spiders into your deck, or Garotes, or any kind of shuffle. Draw them. Ooh, that's such a much more interesting take on this card than only drawing 2 of them, because you could do some pretty nasty stuff with shuffling and then have your stowaway draw all of those cards at once. It's very funny. Would it be broken? I don't think so. I think that it's just too weak anyway, but could it be really funny to do something like crazy? Yeah. Plus, in theory, if a Shuffle Rogue became too strong because of Stowaway, Bomb Warrior and Plague Death Knight would be really good, so you could disrupt that with those shuffle effects, and it would be in-fucking-credible to just kill your opponent because they drew 20 bombs. It would be so funny. Surging Tempest, 1 mana, 1/3, has +1 attack while you have overloaded mana crystals. I think in current year, there's no reason this card couldn't has... How do you word this? Has attack equal... Sorry, I lost my train of thought. Was it? Has attack equal to your overloaded mana crystals. Overload is a huge downside. It is a significant downside. You're losing out on mana for your next turn. Uh, in the past, you had Tunnel Trog, which was gain attack every time you overload. Then they reprinted Surging Tempest as kind of like, okay, we kind of like that idea, but it was too strong. And then Surging Tempest came out, and it was like mediocre completely, if I remember. And then obviously it's unplayable now, but it wasn't that great. If it technically would have synergized with cards like Lickum that have like a similar idea, but I don't know. The reason I think that you could make it has attack equal to your earlier mana code. You make it similar to this now is Sock Puppet Slither Spear, which has attack equal to your hero's attack. So you can have, your 10, 20 attack Slither Spear, which is pretty not that hard to do, actually, to get like a 10 attack Slither Spear. You can do that for like 4 mana. Maybe like 5 mana, actually, but still. And do a lot of damage that way. This will synergize incredibly well with your Overload cards, but Overload is a downside, unlike attack and Slither Spear. So it's gonna, do some more disgusting things. Like if you played this and then played Perpetual Flame, I guess technically on the next, or I guess on the same turn, you would still only have 3, or I guess, okay, let me rephrase. If you played this on 1, and then Perpetual Flame on 2, you would have 2 attack on the turn 2, because you would only technically show 2 overloaded mana crystals, and then on turn 3, it would have 3 attack. If I'm remembering how it works correctly, I know that Overdraft works differently for, how the overload is like handled than other cards, because Overdraft is the only card that actually makes note of having more than just being overloaded. So I would in theory think that this would work like if you have 3 mana crystals and you're overloaded for like 10, it would only give you 3 attack anyway. So it wouldn't be crazy, but if it did work that crazy way, who cares? It's not like it would be that strong, because again, if you're overloaded 10 on like turn 4, you can't play any cards anyway. You know what I mean? That's where I'm going with this idea. Again, overload kind of card. Cumulo Maximus. Battlecry, if you have overloaded mana crystals, deal 5 damage. I mean, come on. Like, look at Cloud Prince. 4 mana, 4/4. If you control a secret, deal 6 damage. What the fuck is this card, man? I think at the end of your turn, if you have overloaded mana crystal, deal 5 damage to the highest health enemy. Is this better? Yes. Does it really make sense for Shaman? Not really, I'll admit. Shaman doesn't really have cards that deal with high or low health like a lot of other classes do, but I think this fits the idea of this card more because first of all, it makes it so it is repeatable, of course. Maybe you lower the stats a little bit, maybe like a 4/4. But the idea is that if you're going to be overloaded, say you play this on like 5, right? And then you overload into your next turn and you can't play any cards on 6, then it will trigger twice. Instead of just being, okay, I'm overloaded, I can get a little bit of overstated damage, or a little bit of like a relatively fair statted minion with a little bit more damage than average. Most 5-drops would be dealing like 4 damage for this body. So 1 more damage point to also be overloaded doesn't make any sense. Instead, it's kind of closer to like Gnome Muncher as a card, where Gnome Muncher just like continually deals damage. So I think that this just fits a little better. I don't know. This one, I'm not going to lie, the Shaman set's a little not that interesting for me, so I had to stretch a tiny bit for these two, but whatever. Dragon Warlock has not been a thing since, like, this expansion. No other good dragon cards have been printed. Nether Breath was a very powerful card, and I think this is a super simple change. You make it 3, and then 5. This is actually, like, what I had proposed for something like Kill Command in the past. 2 mana, deal 3. If you control a beast, deal 5 damage. But, Nether Breath isn't in Hunter. It's only +1 damage overall for the card that already exists. I mean, like, the condition of having a dragon is pretty difficult for Warlock, especially more than most other classes, because, like, Warlock has no fucking dragons. Warlock, I think, literally has 2 dragons total. Okay, I lied. 3, but this one is new and from a mini set. Yeah, 3 dragons total. So, Nether Breath being buffed. Yeah, I mean, come on. It's a cool card. It made, like, Malagos spell damage Warlock kind of playable, if I remember correctly. And that was a cool deck, so, yeah. Spinning, the Dragon Warlock as well is Crazed Netherwing. I think this one's super simple. Wow. -1 all around, deal 3 to all other characters. It's like Duskbreaker, but it has more stats, and hits your opponent in the face and you in the face. So it's a little bit of a downside, but you're a Warlock, you like taking damage because you can heal it off, so you don't really care that much anyway. I think this one's pretty cut and dry. Just -1, -1, -1. Doesn't really need any other changes. So this is the only Galakrond that I'm going to talk about is Warrior, because it's my favorite. I don't like the other Galakrons. They don't really make sense in Wild anyway. So I think that, you just make it so Galakron Warrior, which is the only one that really makes sense in Wild, like I'm saying, get some buffs, fits perfectly. Ritual Chopper, Battlecry, Invoke Galakron. I think whenever your hero attacks, invoke Galakron. So instead of getting 1 invoke from Ritual Chopper, you get 2. Instead of Ritual Chopper being, 2 mana, 5 damage from a weapon, it's technically 8 damage, but yeah, that might be too much, I will be honest. You could argue make it cheaper, but I think that the issue is that, like, you can't attack with a 0 attack weapon, or I would. Maybe let's make it 0 attack, right? And then, okay, wait, can attack at 0 attack. So can attack at 0 attack. So it's the same stat line as what's it called? Fiery War Axe, where it's a 2 mana 3/2 weapon, but it makes it so you can have your 2 triggers of your Galakron here, if your Invoke Hero Power, which gives you +3 attack on your turn. So, it's still technically 2 mana 3/2 weapon. Of course, you can buff it and do all that kind of stuff. You can make it better. You can give it +1/+1, all that stuff. And that's kind of the idea of why, like, Ritual Chopper being buffed this way, is if you give it weapon buffs, you'll gain, like, continual more value. And weapon buffs in Warrior are quite good. They are pretty good, but there's not really that many weapons you care about buffing. So making it so your Ritual Chopper is benefited from your upgrade, your Dr. Krastenov, your other cards like that. I can't name them off the top of my head, I'm sorry. But it makes it so Ritual Chopper benefits from those a lot, and it wouldn't be too strong in Wild. Don't even try and make an argument on that. It would be very fair, because you still have to play your shitty fucking Galakron Warrior, so just giving that a little buff helps. Awaken is, like, weirdly weak. There's no reason that it needs to be 3 mana. I guess, like, back in the day, it made a little more sense to be 3 mana, but by today's standards, this card could easily be 2 mana. 2 mana, deal 1 damage to all minions is already, like, a vanilla effect. So then, and you'll gain 3 attack because of invoking. This one's, like, really cut and dry, just super simple change. Not really much to talk about here. Kronks is a super iconic card to this time period. It draws you Galakron, or it triggers an effect. I think just make it, like, 5 mana, 5/5. Not anything special at all. It, again, puts it at that Lotheb style, and it'll help your Galakron decks a fair amount. Galakron decks aren't really good anyway, so this doesn't really make much of a difference, I will be honest, but Kronks at 6 mana, 6/6 doesn't really make sense for today's game anymore. The effects are still very powerful, but just a -1, -1, -1 across the board helps it significantly. Same idea, Devoted Maniac, good Galakron deck, yada yada. I don't know why the fuck this card is a 4 mana 2/2. I'm not gonna lie to you. It should probably be like this, 4 mana 4/2. There's no reason for it to be a 4 mana 2/2, dude. Like, it just doesn't really make any sense. It's easily the worst Invoke card, but it's neutral, but, like, in today's game, if this card were to have been printed, it would have like probably this stat line, maybe a 4-3, maybe a 5-2, something like that. There's no reason for it to be so understated. Look at something like Burrow Buster, a 5-mana 6-5 with Rush and Excavate. Yes, Excavate is probably, I'd say Excavate 1 and 2 are weaker than Invoke across the board, but Excavate 3 and 4 are significantly stronger than Invoke. So having like a good statted minion to Excavate makes a little bit more sense than like if Devoted Maniac would have great stats. I think it being a 4-2 helps a lot. It just makes it so it can actually kill stuff. It can't kill anything. It's a 2-2. It can't do anything. And then the last card I want to talk about is Faceless Corruptor. This, again, super simple change. It's just make it 4 mana. It's a 4 mana 5-4 that effectively is going to give another one of your minions Rush, and then on average, I'd say +2/+2. Is that too good for Wild standards? Not in the slightest. Is it very powerful and makes this card, like, probably worth running? Oh, for sure. There's definitely use cases to actually be running this, this card. You can make it in, like, a Shutterwalk Shaman to have a very powerful Battlecry, which helps you, you know, have more Shutterwalks. It's just a good removal card now for a lot of decks as well, because it'll give you 5/4s with Rush. You have to consider that in Wild, 8/8s are king, so, and you can get 8/8s for free, right? So Faceless Corruptor, yeah, it's 4 mana, but you can kill 1 8/8 as long as you, transform something else. That's not that great. It really isn't. So yeah, it's a lot of stats, and it can help you push a lot in like a lot of weak decks, and it's effectively also a buff. Like, it's effectively buffing the minion, but at the same time, if your minion has an effect on board, it's sometimes not great to change into Faceless Corruptor. So yeah, 4 mana 5/4, I think completely fine for this card. That's gonna be it from me. If you enjoyed, make sure to like, comment, and subscribe. Tell me you think down below. Did I change any cards you didn't like? Should I have changed a different card instead? Do you like any of the changes I proposed? Do you think any of them are too strong, too weak? Tell me all about it, and I'll see you guys next time. Peace.
Shadows are rising again!
Darker than they've ever been. As evil